Hey everybody, what's going on? We are back with a very cool comparison between two cameras. The most high-tech full-frame camera on the market, arguably, the Sony A7R IV, versus the most high-tech prosumer medium format camera on the market, arguably, the GFX100 by Fujifilm. Now, this is going to be a comparison. We're going to take them around. We're going to show you the images in Lightroom. We're going to compare to see how the Sony handles full frame at 61 megapixels versus a 102 megapixel medium format sensor. Now, of course, medium format will give you possibly better dynamic range, more sharpness, but how much so? Is it going to be that much different that you're going to want to invest in this versus this? Or is this going to be the right camera for you? Guys, let's find out. All right, so now we're inside Lightroom Cc to show images between the Sony A7R IV and the GFX100. Now, this is not a scientific comparison. I'm not shooting a wall with a bunch of artifacts in there and I'm gonna be, just putting it on a tripod, because that's not how we shoot in our lives. At least that's not how I shoot. I actually shoot photos and I wanna show you what the images look like. And you get a sense of the comparison between various different lenses and the colors and thus far. Now, these images have been edited, but I will show you some of the edits of what I've done and also show you some of the raw images to give you an idea of what it looks like coming out of camera. All right, first let's look at Portraiture. Now, this is my friend Alan right here. And I shot this portraiture with him with the A7R IV with the 24-70 f2.8 GM lens. Now, we know this lens needs to be updated. It's not the sharpest lens in Sony's lineup. It doesn't really match the resolving power of the Sony A7R IV, but nonetheless, I wanted to show you what it looks like. Now, this is a relatively sharp image. Look at this. You can see all the detail in the eyelashes and the eyebrows, facial hair, pores, skin markings, it's all there. But one thing about the Sony image, and this could be due to the lens as well as the sensor, is that the colors just don't really come alive in the same way that a medium format image will come about. And I'm going to give you an idea right now. This is with the GFX100. Now, obviously, if we want to look at detail, there's far more detail. We're talking 102 megapixel medium format sensor versus 61 megapixels on a full frame, so you are going to see slightly more detail. However, when you go on social media, a lot of that detail will be lost in the compression, so it doesn't really make a difference. But if you are going to be printing, or if you're going to be, blowing these up on, let's say, a very large display, that's when you might see the difference in between them. But the one thing that I notice about the GFX100, and this goes throughout even a lot of different portraitures that I've taken, even just any subject, is the graduation in colors, the depth. 16-bit, 14-bit. You're going to see a difference in terms of color, in terms of just tonality, dynamic range. The Sony is a great camera for dynamic range, especially in full frame. I don't think there's anything any better out there in full frame than the Sony A7R IV. But we're talking medium format. Look at just the skin tones on this. It is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, honestly speaking, if I'm going to shoot portraiture, medium format all the way, and this really just shows you that. Here's another example of the GFX100 in portraiture. Now, this is shot at ISO 100, right? I had to do some skin softening now because, ladies out there aren't going to like the GFX100 if you show every single flaw out there. But look at this. Look at the eye. If I want to zoom in, you can see the white bag that I'm holding on while I'm taking a picture of her, okay? Now, this is not a small image, mind you, okay? I'm just going to give you an idea. 574.25 megabytes for a TIFF file, because what I did with this image is I did my basic color correction in Capture One. I wanted to try Capture One, then I brought it into Lightroom because I use Lightroom majority of the time for mobile usage, because I'm using it on my iPhone or on my Android phone. I'm using it on a tablet. I'm using it on the go, and Capture One unfortunately doesn't have those options as of yet. So anyway, but look at the detail. Look at the skin tone on this. It just is beautiful. The hair, everything. It is really a stunning image. And that just kind of shows you the power of the GFX100. And it's a Sony, it comes close, but it's not the same. And for those who say, well, it's good enough, yeah, depending on your workflow, it might be good enough. But if you really want the best, it's the Fujifilm, especially for portraiture. Okay, let's look at animals. Now, I did talk about the 24-70 f2.8, but let's talk about Sony's best lens, in my opinion. and that is the 135 1.8. As you can tell right off the bat, this is a very sharp image. This is my dog. I love shooting photos of her when she wants to stand still, but this is really a beautiful image. You can see, look at the hairs here. Look at the hairs, the detail. And there's just such a thin, shallow depth of field at 135 1.8. I was relatively close, but this is a sharp image. Even the eyeball here is not that sharp, but the hairs right here, you can see every hair. Beautiful lens. This lens shows the power of the Sony A7R IV more than I think any other lens out there except maybe the 24 1.4. I tried to get my hands on that lens. I had it for about a day. I got a couple of shots, but nothing worth showing to you because I really didn't have a lot of time. I got it in the afternoon. I had to give it back the next morning, so it was really a short turnaround time. Anyway, let me show you a picture of my dog with the GFX100. Now, again, large image. We're looking at 208.11 megabytes. This is the raw file, okay? This is in Lightroom. So if I go into a TIFF, it jumps up quite a bit. But again, look at the detail here in terms of the hairs. It's relatively close to the Sony, I'm not gonna lie to you, okay? It's relatively close. But the graduation, the light falls off, the shadows, the highlights, it almost looks like the image just pops. It's got this 3D pop, and that is what a lot of people talk about when they talk about medium format, that 3D pop. For me, I see it in this image, plus also the dynamic range. When I shot this, you didn't see a lot of the clouds there, but you can bring it back down. There's a lot of editing room you can do with these files. Let me just kind of show you this real quick. So I can bring down the shadows all the way up. Look at this, to black, all the way up. Highlights, bring down, expose, overexpose, bring down. There's a lot of detail in this image. That's the one nice thing about medium format. It allows a little bit more flexibility, so even if your exposure is slightly off, you always want to try to nail your exposure as much as you can right out of the camera, but if you are slightly off, you have a little bit more room with the GFX. Now, I'll show you this camera. I'll show you this as well. Here's actually more of a, let's actually go here, and let's just reset to original. This is the original image, okay? Sharp, and the hairs, looks great. Color cast, that's Sony. Not a big fan of it. Hopefully they fix that in the future, but nonetheless, there is still a lot of room to be played here with this as well. Look at that. So you can pull those down, shadows. Not as much as the GFX, as you can tell, not as much, but still very impressive for full frame. No issues at all. Here's another photo of my dog trainer, Fu Wong, and his dog as well. And I love this image. I love the feel of it. This is with the 2470. Again, this is the Sony. I mean, is it pin sharp? No, it captures what you need to capture, but you get the feel there. And sometimes the feel is more important than being a pixel peeper. But we are pixel peeping for this part of the review, so I'm just showing you that. Again, though, this is probably one of the issues with the 2470 is that it's not the sharpest lens out there. Here's another picture of his dog at the beach. Again, not a pin sharp, but I love the feel, I love the vibe, so I went with this. Here's the 135 1.8 with a very boring subject. It just holds Splenda and sugar. But I wanted to kind of show you the detail and just the tonality that you can grab with this lens on this A7R IV. A little bit of purple fringing, as you can see right there. This is very correctable. This is not an issue, but just look at the detail, the subtlety here. If Sony can make more lenses like the 135 1.8, I tell you what, the A7R IV would probably sell even more than it already has because it really just showcases the power of it. Low light. This is low light performance with the Sony A7R IV. A lot of latitude in this. You can do a lot of editing in here. Highlights. A lot of play in the images here. This is the one good thing about these images. I mean, I think it was pretty much like this when I shot it. And then obviously you can bring out a lot of detail. Yeah, you are going to see some noise out there, but nonetheless, there is a lot of information there. You got to give it credit to Sony on this one. But again, you know, when you want to shoot lower light, here's a lower light image with the GFX100. Look at the detail. And by the way, this is the JPEG image. This is not even a RAW image. This is JPEG. And that's the kind of detail you can pull out of it. One thing that I was told when I was shooting with the GFX, they said, look, if you're going to post to social media, don't waste your time editing RAW files because A, you're going to be compressing just to get it down to the size that Instagram or Facebook will be able to use. And B, the JPEG at 80 megabytes is more than adequate. All right, and here's another GFX100 image. I was cutting bread. Look at the detail right here. Look at the tonality here. Even though I shot this in color, I converted it to black and white, but it's still a very beautiful image. This is a RAW file, 208 megabytes. So guys, get ready. If you want the GFX100, get yourself an external hard drive, get yourself some information, because there is a lot of storage you're gonna need to carry these files, but these do beautifully. And if I want to export it to a JPEG, I'm gonna probably be around 80 megabytes or thereabouts. It's gonna still be a large file. So if you want to post to social media or Instagram, you might have to bring this file down a little bit further. All right, guys, that's pretty much it with the GFX100 versus the Sony A7R IV. Both are very formidable cameras. Yes, the medium format will give you a much better, tonality, dynamic range, color depth. You get a little bit more of that 3D pop to it. But if you're only shooting for social media, you can get away with the Sony A7R IV, and there's no issues with that. But if you want the optimal in image quality, of course, it's the GFX100. I mean, this is probably one of the best, if not the best, consumer medium format cameras on the market currently. All right, so we wanted to sex up this ending of the video with two topless men here, because you can't do two topless women nowadays, guys. Just can't do it. Different era, different era. Anyway, jokes aside, both of these cameras perform phenomenally, but as you can see in the Sony images, it's really up to the lens. Can the lens resolve 61 megapixels? As we can see with the 2470, not quite, but the 135 1.8 is a phenomenal lens, and it really showcases the power of this sensor. However, with the Fujifilm GFX100, I mean, these are clearly a sharper image. And these lenses are made for this sensor, made to resolve at 100 megapixels, and you can clearly see the difference. Now, there will be an argument. Well, if I'm posting on social media, will I see a difference? Maybe not as much as you think nowadays, but there still is a difference. Tonality, depth of field, dynamic range, all that comes into play. And I'll tell you what, I mean, medium formats, folks. But you got to give it to Sony. They did one hell of a job with the A7R IV. Anyway, those are my thoughts on these two cameras. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Until the next one, take care.